Brenda was graduating from law school. Brenda is black, a black female. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then, I'm thinking that way, but keep in mind, I'm a high school teacher. But I'm thinking, they let us go to law school and graduate from law school, and Brenda is going to be a lawyer? Like, yeah. So from that point, I started to believe I can be a lawyer. Hi, welcome to my office.
Meet attorney at law Annette Callaghan. She has been practicing law in Okinawa, Japan for over 25 years. She is also a professor at the University of Ryukyu Law School in Okinawa, where she lectures on Introduction to American Law. Among her many achievements was her induction into the Southern University Law Center Hall of Fame for outstanding and dedicated service to her community, profession, and alma mater. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Melanated Files. My name is Ranzo, and today, yes, I'm still in Okinawa, okay? Listen, I might move out this side. So today we're joined by attorney Callaghan. Can you introduce yourself to the world?
Yes, my name is Annette Callaghan. I'm here in Okinawa, Japan. Moved here in 1995, so that's 25 years ago. Was able to get licensed to practice law here in Japan. And since that time, since 1995, I have lived here in Okinawa.
Okay, how did the journey begin? Why Japan in the first place?
Well, first of all, I used to be an Air Force JAG, and that's a member of the Judge Advocate General Corps, Corps of Lawyers in the military. And one of my assignments was here in Okinawa on Kadena Air Force Base. And during that time, I realized there was a problem. And the problem being, a lot of the local national women were here having babies either in a marriage or out of wedlock.
Okay.
Having babies with American military guys. And once the military member assignment was over, he would be gone, and she would be left as a single parent. That was something that was pulling on my heartstring. And I kept thinking, somebody has to do something to help these ladies. And so my next assignment, I left Okinawa in 1993.
Okay.
Went back to the United States, and the assignment then was in Los Angeles. And it was there that I started to call the child support offices to let them know, it's like, hey, I think we have a problem in Okinawa and somebody need to address it. And, but, nobody, absolutely no one would get involved.
Okay.
And so I kept thinking, somebody, but then eventually it started to turn to me, and it's like, why not you? And so I thought, hey, maybe I should. So it was at that point that I quit the military, and in 1995 I moved here.
Okay. Wow.
And then, but the next hurdle was to try to get licensed to practice law in Japan. And it took about a year to work through the process, and the process being a lot of red tape. And when I say red tape, I don't mean the red tape like we see in the United States that we think is so horrific. No, the red tape here put the U.S. red tape to shame.
Okay.
And so went through all the red tape or whatever, was able to get licensed to practice law, in Japan, set up my practice. And then the next thing was, how do I begin to help these women? And so the most important thing was just start. I started to do my research, and I said, well, maybe it has something to do with the status of forces agreement.
Okay.
Maybe, that somehow I can use the status of forces agreement, which is an agreement between Japan and the United States. And there could be something in that document that would help. And I researched it, and there was nothing.
Okay.
And I thought, well, there used to be a lot of military troops in the Philippines. I'm sure they had the same problem. So I researched the status force agreement that was at one time between the Philippines and the United States. And right now that document is up one page.
Okay.
That was no help. And so I said, well, maybe Germany, because again, lots of troops used to be in Germany until they started closing bases down. And I thought, let me contact, maybe the Ministry of Justice in Germany, to see whether or not they would be able to help or give me some guidance as to how I can be of help here in Japan. So I wrote to the Ministry of Justice, and then they said, hey, look, they had an agreement, kind of like a bilateral agreement with 48 of the 50 states.
Okay.
And so that's how they were doing it at that time. And so they said, maybe I wanted to contact the International Child Support Section of the Attorney General's office in Texas. And I thought, okay, I can do that. So I did. And then that office says, hey, every year in the United States, there's a big conference where representatives from child support offices at all the 50 states come together. And they have this big conference on handling these international cases or whatever. And they said, why don't you start coming? And so I started to go and started to meet people from the different 50 states and talk to them about the problem we have in Okinawa and how can they help. And so they were very, very helpful.
Okay.
Absolutely helpful. So that's how I built the child support program that I have here in my office. And it is the only child support program in Asia.
Oh, wow.
There's no other means of trying to get child support, except, like through my office here, which is what I was able to set up through the National Child Support Enforcement Association.
So you operate internationally?
Internationally.
Okay.
And so, did that and set up shop. And I've been here, trying to do this and other things as well. But that's the focal point of my practice, because that was my main reason for coming to Okinawa, was to help those ladies. And one of the hurdles that recently developed was the checks that come, the child support checks that come from the United States, come to Japan. And of course, the Japanese ladies, where do they go? To the Japanese bank to cash the checks. Well, the Japanese banks, at least the ones here in Okinawa, no longer accept US dollar checks.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
They don't. So then I'm like, okay, what else do I do? And so I had to meet with the people at the bank on the base on Kadena, explain the situation to them, and they're always very accommodating. And so they said, sure, we can, help. And so we set up a plan where I get the checks from the child support recipients, the ladies, and then about once a month, I go to the base and I cash all the checks. And then I come back and I divvy up all the money, and then we call the ladies and says, hey, your money's here, your money's here. So they come. The one who are in like mainland Japan or Miyako or, one of the outlying islands, once I get their dollars, and then we go to the money changer and we change it to Japanese yen, then we go to the post office and then we send them their money that way.
Okay.
So that problem was able to be resolved. And then another obstacle was, when a lot of the fathers were saying, oh, that's not my child. Oh, yeah, I was in Okinawa, but I don't know. I didn't date any Japanese women or whatever. So now we have a DNA situation.
Okay.
So, and I thought, okay, what can we do with that? How can I help? And so, again, I think it was at the time it was LabCorp or Gene Screen, and I collaborated or whatever. And so they were able to train me, send me all the training material so I could be trained as someone who collect DNA samples. And then we overnight it, FedEx to the States, have it tested. And so the dad is taken to court, or the biological father taken to court. And the judge says, okay, yeah, we got the results here. You are the father, and here's how much child support you have to pay. So every time there's been an obstacle, there have been a solution. So it hasn't been. I mean, it's been not a totally easy road, but it was and continued to be manageable.
Okay. Were these problems pervasive at the time?
Oh yeah,
Major issue?
and it continues to be.
Okay.
You know, because I think anywhere you got man and woman, you're going to have child support issues.
Okay.
So it continues to be, and not just here, but in the United States as well. But at least in the United States, you can tap into the child support system there, because there is a child support program that's set up in the United States. But here, we don't have that luxury.
So how has it been so far? What has the response been since you've been doing this since 1995?
Right. When I first started in 1995, for the first 10 years until like 2005 or whatever, I did it for free, totally pro bono.
Okay.
I didn't charge the ladies anything
You had
at
an
all.
office as well?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, but you know, child support wasn't the only thing we did, you know, to keep the office afloat.
Okay.
You know, I took other cases as well, you know, like divorce and court martials and, you know, issues coming up on the base, discrimination cases, medical malpractice, stuff like that. But the pro bono part mainly dealt, you know, was the child support program. And so for the first 10 years, it was totally free service. But then the program grew to like 300 cases, and so quickly. And I had hired a team of people, and I'm like, this is the largest part of the office, but it's not bringing in any funds. So then I had to start charging. And of course, once you start charging, you know, your numbers are going to fall off, because not all the women, you know, can afford, you know, the legal fees or whatever. But yeah, it continues to be. And my only concern is once I leave Okinawa, and at some point I will, but you know, once I leave, who will take over this program? Who will do this? Because it will continue to be a problem.
So is it just for local ladies and foreign men in terms of your purview?
No, it's only, well, first of all, in order to use the child support program in the States, the non-custodial parent, who is 99.9% of the time the dad, has to be located in the States.
Okay.
Because that's where the child support program is.
Okay.
See, we don't have one out here that I can tap into.
I see, okay.
Right.
Okay, so it's only for the foreigners then.
Right, because I figure, you know, with the Japanese, they can go to Japanese court and try to figure out what they're going to do.
True.
But yeah, for the U.S. side, to tap into the U.S. part of it, the guy must be in the United States.
What got you into law? What drove you to do that? Was it a sense of justice? Like, why law?
Okay, you find this really interesting. Growing up, my mother had 10 kids.
Okay.
Right? Okay. And during the summer, we're out of school. So what are you going to do to keep track of 10 kids when my mother had to work, my stepfather had to work? And so, you know, how do you keep track of 10 kids? Well, we lived up the street from the courthouse.
Okay.
And so she would dress us up, you know, and again, I was like in high school at the time. And I still don't know until this day why no one in the courtroom asked us, why are all those kids sitting in the back of the courtroom?
Okay.
Well, what are they doing here? Right. And so, you know, we would go and just sit and listening to trials.
So your mom took you there as
No, she didn't take us. She sent us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is, I guess, was her way of keeping track of where her kids are. It's like, where your kid? Oh, they're in court. You know, whatever.
Oh, wow.
And we knew to sit there and not say a word, not talk, not make any noise. But the thing is, that's not what encouraged me to become a lawyer. That told me that being a lawyer wasn't for me. And let me explain that. Because as we sat there, we saw the judge was white, the prosecutor white, the defense attorney's white, and defendant's black.
Okay.
The person in trouble. And so I thought, and keep in mind, I grew up in Louisiana. So it was my thinking is like, oh, so it's like I never saw a black prosecutor or a black judge or whatever, you know, at that time. And so I thought, well, maybe that's a career that's not for us.
Oh, wow. Representation. I keep telling you guys.
Yeah. And so fast forward, graduated from high school, went to college, majored in business education to teach business subjects like typing, shorthand, communication skills, stuff like that. Still I'm thinking, I'm a teacher because, that's kind of expected. But being a lawyer, no, don't even think that. And so I was satisfied, being a teacher. And then the assistant principal in the high school where I was saying, have you thought about going to law school? And I was like, no, law school, no way. And it was one of the black teachers on the faculty because I was teaching high school at the time in Omaha, Nebraska. And she said, hey, there's graduation going on at Creighton University. And, they have undergraduate and law school there. And she says, at Creighton, there's a graduation going on, and a friend of mine's graduating, she says, so why don't you come with me? And I said, oh, okay. So I went with Mary Harvey was her name. And so, we went to the graduation, and her friend was Brenda, who used to be a student of Mary's. Brenda was graduating from law school. Brenda is black, a black female. And I was like, whoa. So they let us.
Oh, wow.
Right. And then, I'm thinking that way, but keep in mind, I'm a high school teacher. But I'm thinking they let us go to law school and graduate from law school. And Brenda is going to be a lawyer? Like, yeah. This is the Creighton University annual commencement exercise program of the graduation, the law school graduation I attended in 1977, where Brenda graduated from law school. This is the program. So from that point, I started to believe I can be a lawyer. Brenda did it, and it's kind of like goes hand in hand with what you're doing with, the Black experience in Japan, to show they did it. He did it, she did it, you can do it, kind of thing. And so that's what kind of like, I guess, propelled me toward law school.
So you saw this, right? And it changed your worldview. When you went to the courthouse all the time, a black person was
the defendant, right?
Right. And so you saw this now, and what came into your mind? Did you plot your route to law school? What happened?
No, when I'm in the courthouse,
When you saw, after you saw Brenda.
Oh, after I saw Brenda,
yeah.
Then, it's like I said, the assistant principal was telling me, and, so I started.
Why did they say that? Did they see something? They recognized something in you?
I don't know why, but he was like constantly, and he just passed away a couple of years ago. Brenda just passed away a couple of years. Not Brenda. I'm sorry, Mary. But, I don't know what it was. And as a matter of fact, he set up an appointment for me to go meet with the dean of the law school at Creighton, to talk about going to law school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so all these people surrounded by me, and that's what's also very important. It's like, when you're on a certain path, you have to surround yourself by positive thinking people and get rid of all the negativity. And it could be very close relatives who are in your ear with a lot of negative stuff. You have to shut that down. If you're going to follow that path, you have to surround yourself with those people who are going to be supporters of you, who are going to push you forward, who's going to hold you accountable for whatever it is that you say you're trying to do. And so, so different people started saying, I think you should go to law school. Yeah, you'll be great, go to law school. And then I applied for a scholarship, and I got a full scholarship that paid for my entire law school education.
Wow.
So going to law school cost me nothing.
It was waiting for you. It was like it was for you.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so, of course, now I do a lot of give back. I'm giving back to the law school because I want to invest in those coming behind me.
So what was the time frame between them telling you that, you should go to law school, to when you actually decided to go to law school?
Okay, I was in Nebraska. Let's see, I started teaching there in 75. I left about 1977. I tell you how old I am. They started you know, I started hearing people, you know, and then the people around me, friends or whatever, you know, championing, you know, it's like, hey, you need to go to law school. So that was 1978, I was in law school.
Wow. So about 1 year.
Yeah.
Wow. And then you went through the process. Like, what? Your story just sounds like it was meant to be. It's
Exactly.
It's like everything, the people that came into your life that you were around, the things that you did. Your mom is sending you to the courthouse.
I know.
The whole thing, getting invited to the graduation, seeing that, changing your mindset. It's just like, in hindsight, it's like
Exactly. And that's why I said, when you're on the right path, you can turn around and look and see that it wasn't all you.
Yeah.
You can see all the people, all the, you know, the help that you receive, all the obstacles you were able to overcome, the people who were put in place, you know, who were right there at the time they were needed.
How did you feel inside? Were you able to identify or recognize that something was going on here, or you just felt like, you know, just normal? You're like, okay, this, I'm going after this, I'm doing this. Or did you feel like, okay, I'm on the right path, like I'm being led or something?
It wasn't until I was here back in 1995, and at the time I was living and working in that little place that my Japanese friend had rented, you know, because I needed a lease agreement, right? And I was living there, and it was in Okinawa City, and I was living on the 3rd floor, and I had come home earlier that day, and it was set up kind of like this, where this part here was parking, but the sidewalk was right there, right? And then traffic was right there. And I, you know, it's like I drove home, you know, with a lot of stuff in my books and whatever, and I'm going upstairs to the 3rd floor. And what I didn't realize, that I had taken my big briefcase out of the car and sit in the back of my car, which is right at the sidewalk. My checkbook, all my money, my cash money, my passport, everything was in that briefcase. And, you know, I set it down, and then I'm getting stuff out of the car. I shut the car and I lock it, and I went upstairs. I forgot I left the briefcase.
Oh, on the sidewalk?
On the sidewalk.
Okay.
And so I went on, nighttime came, I went to bed, went to sleep, woke up the next morning, and I needed to get something out of my briefcase.
Oh, snap. Wow.
And then I was like, my briefcase. And so I'm looking, and my briefcase is nowhere in the apartment. And so I was like, did I leave it? No, I took everything out of the car. Maybe I left it in the car. And I came downstairs, and I looked, and it was still sitting there.
Wow.
And all I could do is stand there and cry.
Wow.
Because I knew then that this was a journey I was not on by myself.
Yeah. Wow, that's a fascinating story. That's why I wanted to go down. Okay, so that was when you knew that, okay, this is something special.
Right.
Right?
That's right. And that's when I knew that I was on the right path. It's like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, with all of the help. And then I started to sit and then, you know, kind of like reevaluate all the things that had gone on, like the lawyer in Naha. You know, I mean, you know, who says, yeah, the Japanese lawyer, you know, who $20,000 in an account in my name, barely knew me.
Yeah.
What if I had taken that money out and then I'm going back to the States?
Yeah.
You know, kind of thing. But it's just all the people that I had met along the way were now, it was like watching a chess game and seeing everybody move into the right place. Like, get in your place, is it, you know, and they were right where they needed to be when I needed them.
Any advice that you could impart after recognizing that to other people who are watching, that, I don't know, like something that you took away from that you can impart to someone that might help them along their journey? Like recognizing something, I don't know. Right.
And I think what I look at is like there's a quiet, still voice that speaks. And we get so busy with life that we miss those little signs along the way. And there are signs along the way that's telling us either we're on the right path or not. And we just need to slow down and be mindful of the fact that, you know, you are not alone. That, you know, if you have a calling, it's not all going to be on you.
Okay.
It's not going to all be you, but just one step at a time, kind of thing. Just one step at a time, and it'll get you there.
Okay. So I guess, so just to put these last two pieces together, one step at a time. One, people saw something in you as it relates to law school. You went, right? And then the second one was coming to Japan, right? Feeling this desire to do this thing, but you never knew exactly how you were going to do it, but you wanted to do it.
Right.
And you took the first step.
Exactly.
Right? So take the step. What about someone that's in law school right now? Any advice in part? Like if someone is going through it and they might be like, it's so tough. Any
Right.
advice?
Law school is tough.
I can imagine.
The bar exam is something that I never want to do again in life.
Wow.
It is. I mean, you have to really, really be dedicated and surround yourself with those individuals who support your vision, there to encourage you and not to say, it's like, what? Oh, not again. You got to study again, as opposed to really kind of like pushing you and saying, hey, I got your back. You need me to do something for you, whatever. Get in there, study, because that's what it's going to take. Total dedication to the cause.
Okay. What were some of the red tapes? Because you said there were a lot of red tapes initially. What did you face when you were trying to get licensed here as a foreign lawyer?
Okay. The first thing I did, because I was in California at the time.
Okay.
And so the first thing I did, I contacted the Japanese embassy in Los Angeles. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about going to Japan or whatever. I would like to see if I can get licensed to practice law. Is it at all possible, kind of thing. So they sent me a little package. And then they recommended that I contact the Ministry of Justice in Tokyo.
Okay.
And so I contacted the Ministry of Justice and says, do you guys have a program for foreign lawyers practicing law in Japan? And then they said, they had just started. They had just opened up the country to Gaikoko Hojima Bengoshi, which is foreign international lawyer. And so they said, but first, you can't just apply, whatever. You have to send them your credentials, like, your undergraduate college transcript, your law school transcript, your license to practice law, etc. Send them all that, and they will determine whether or not, you're worthy.
You're qualified enough.
Whether you're qualified to even receive the application.
Okay.
Right. So then I got all of that together, and I sent it to them. And then they said, okay, fine. So they sent me the application, which was 32 pages.
Okay.
And it was one pack, and it's the legal size sheet of paper. It's not like the letter size.
Okay, not A4, the long one.
Exactly. And so they said, fill these out. One package was in English, and the other one was in Japanese. So I filled it out in English, and then I had to have it translated on the Japanese one. Okay. And then I was able to send it to them. Now, I'm still in California at the time because I'm trying to do this. I didn't want to just move here until I knew, they said, okay, good to go, kind of thing. And so I said, I'm going to stay in California until I get a yes or no.
Okay.
All right. So then, I sent the English and Japanese to them. And then they're like, oh, okay, so... let's look at page 1. And that's the way the Japanese will do it. It's not like they said, page 1, you want to change this. Page 5, take this out. Page 6, you need such and such and such. No, page 1, you do update this or whatever. I'm like, okay, I only had one error, right?
Okay.
Page 1. And then so I retranslate that page, get that page, I re-accomplish the English. And then have the Japanese part redone.
Okay.
And then I send it to them. And I'm thinking, okay, I should get an answer soon. No. Then they go back, next page. Look at it. And they walk you through that one page at a time. So then it's like, okay, so we're going through that. And then they say, you need liability insurance, like professional liability, like malpractice insurance, right? And so it's professional liability insurance. And so I said, okay, I just contact an insurance company. And I know like in the U.S. through the bar associations, lawyers have like Gills Bar or whatever, where they can apply to be covered by the professional liability insurance. And so I contacted them, and I'm licensed in Louisiana and Nebraska.
Okay.
And so I contacted Louisiana and said, hey, this is what I plan to do. Can I get an insurance policy? Because I need to have a policy as part of the application process. And so they're like, but you're not going to be practicing in Louisiana? I said, no. And they said, can't write you a policy. So then I was, okay, Nebraska, same thing. Can't write you a policy. You're not going to be practicing in the country.
Yeah.
So then I said, well, I'll just start with then looking at Japanese insurance companies. And they're like, what? Foreign lawyer? Because keep in mind, all these 25 years, I am the only foreign lawyer Okinawa has ever seen.
Okay. Wow.
So there was nobody for me to go to say how you guys did it. And so I was like, okay, fine. So contacting insurance companies here, and they're like, no, we don't write that kind of policy. So there was one in Tokyo, contacted that insurance company, and they said, we can't write you a policy now because you're not licensed to practice law yet. But once you become licensed to practice law, we can write you a policy.
Isn't that catch-22?
Exactly. Because I'm like, but I need the policy in order to get licensed. And they said, well, when you get licensed, we can write you a policy. And I was like, I don't believe this. So then one of the insurance companies, I think it was AIU or whatever in Tokyo, said, look, if you contact AIU in Hong Kong, they will write you a policy.
Okay.
So just contact them. So then I was like, oh, okay, there is hope. So I contacted AIU, and they said, oh, yeah, we'll write you a policy. Send us a check for $7,500, and we'll write you a policy. And I said, well, how long is that policy good for?
Is that how that works?
And then they said, it's good for a year. Every year you have to pay $7,500. And I'm like, but the Japanese hasn't said yes or no yet. So if I send you $7,500 and you say no, do I get my money back or whatever? And they said, no, look, you want the policy? You send us $7,500. And I was like,
is that the standard? That price?
No, that's crazy because now in Japan, it's now just like $300-something a year.
Okay, that sounds more like it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But here, I guess, in Hong Kong, they have you over a barrel. It's like, you want a policy, you got to pay.
You're selling it pretty much.
Right, exactly. And I was like, I don't believe this. So I had to write them a check and send them $7,500 so he could send me a policy. And this is still just the application process. And so it's like, okay, fine. So I overcame that hurdle.
Okay.
Then the next hurdle, was like, this is Ministry of Justice asking, you got any money? Where's your money? In a Japanese bank? Or, how are you going to take care of yourself? You opening an office or whatever? How? And I said, well, my money is in a U.S. bank. And so they said, well, how much you have? And I told them, and they're like, that's not enough to move to Japan. Because, we're talking like $30,000. That's not enough. To move to Japan and open a law practice? No. And I said, but okay, so how much is enough? Because, I might find money to kind of move around or whatever. And then they're like, no, you have to tell us what you have. We're not going to tell you what we're looking for.
Okay.
You got to tell us what you got, and we'll say yes or no. So I was like, okay, so $30,000 is no. So what am I going to do? And so I happen to be talking to a Japanese lawyer in Naha and telling him, it's like, look, I did this whole leap of faith thing. Oh, because at that point I had to move to Okinawa. Yeah, I had to move because they got to the point where they wanted a lease as part of the application process. They wanted to see a lease. I didn't have a lease. I was still living in California. And then they're like, no. We need to see that you have a place for your office and for you to live. And so that's what you need to provide to us.
So what about the visa part? How did that part?
Well, not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. And so they said, so this is what we need to see is that you have office space and a place to live in Okinawa. And so I had to contact an Okinawan friend that I had from when I was active duty on Kadena. Contact the Okinawa friend and said, hey, look, this is the situation. Find me a place to rent. Well, first of all, I had to get Ministry of Justice permission to live and work in the same place because I didn't want to have to pay rent in two different places. And so they said, Ministry of Justice says, yeah, okay, fine, that'll work. And so I told her, my Japanese friend, I said, find me a place to rent. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care how big or small it is or whatever, reasonable. Get me a lease because I need to be able to show I have a place. So then, and then I gave her money to pay the rent from January to March because I figured surely 3 months. Because I started it October of the previous year, the process. So then I thought by March, they should know something and they should tell me yes or no. Because I didn't want to get into a year's lease and then they said, no, we're not giving you a license. And then I'm stuck with a place over here I'm paying rent.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, fine. So she sent the lease and then I made that a part of the package. But then by March, they still asking for stuff like, about the money. And I was like, oh my goodness. So now I can't be paying rent in California and rent here or whatever. So that's when I decided to come here. Okay, so now I'm here. And then now they're saying, where is your money kind of thing, right? And then so, but I was in Naha talking to a Japanese lawyer. And I said, hey, look, this is the situation. I moved all the way out here, took this leap of faith, but it is not working. I'm going to have to go home. And so he's like, no. He says, look, my wife can meet you here at my office Monday morning. She will take you to the bank. We will open an account and we'll deposit about $20,000 in an account in your name. Wow. And we're going to take that and put that with your 30 and then see what they say. And I was like, oh,
a really good friend.
Yeah. I mean, and then these are people I barely knew.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so that's what I said, wow. And so anyway, Monday morning, I went, met, and he and his wife and I went to the bank and she opened the account and, took care of all the paperwork or whatever. And then the bank gave me, it's like a statement of the fact that I had that money in that bank. And then with my other 30, had 50 or whatever. And then, but I asked him, I said, but, they won't tell me what number they're looking for. What if this is not enough? And he said, we will keep depositing until they're satisfied. And I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, fine. So, but they were satisfied with that.
Okay.
So that worked. And then the next thing, it's like we had made it through the 32 pages and 32 pages of the application. And so now they says like, okay, now we're going to mail you color-coded application, which is the same thing, same 32 pages, but one is like a kind of a buff color pages, and the other one was like a lime green pages that, I don't know why, but everything with all the corrections or whatever that I had gone through, and they had taught me how to properly fill out the application. So now I had to reaccomplish that on the buff colored pages and then the light green pages or whatever, the translation. And then they said, but don't mail it this time. You have to come to Tokyo and present it in person.
Okay.
To the Ministry of Justice. Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, okay, now airfare was crazy. The yen rate was like 70-something yen to the dollar. And so airplane fare was crazy. And then they said, bring a translator with you. Now, up until this point, they were communicating with me back and forth in English. But suddenly, we're at the end of all this, and then they're telling me, it's like you have to fly to Tokyo, and you have to bring a translator with you. And so I said, okay, fine. Well, it just so happened that there was this Japanese lady who I knew from my active duty days who used to live in Okinawa but now lived in mainland Japan.
Okay.
So I was talking to her about this situation. I says, where am I going to find a translator? I'm going to have to pay the person. These people are already looking at my dollars, in the bank and telling me you don't have enough or whatever. So I got to be careful with the money.
Okay.
And so I said, so what, and she says, well, no, don't fly anybody from Okinawa. You come. Don't worry about staying at a hotel. You can stay at my house.
Okay.
And then I will go with you, and then I'll do my best to translate. And I was like, cool. That worked out. So, and that's exactly what I did. I stayed at her house or whatever. So we went to the Ministry of Justice together. And then they looking at all my paperwork or whatever. They got me signing things or whatever. So I had to sign certain forms. And then they said they wanted to see my passport. So I showed them my passport. And they said, where's your visa?
Now the visa.
And I was like, but I can't get my visa stamp through immigration until I'm licensed.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then they said, but you should not have come to Japan without a visa. And I said, but I can't get a visa until I'm licensed. And they're like, no. You shouldn't have come, because you don't have a visa or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't believe this. I've come to the end. And they're telling me that, no, I don't have what I need. So then they said, 1 minute. So then they went to get some real old guy from the bowels of the Ministry of Justice building or whatever. And they brought him in, and he spoke perfect English. And he says, let me get this straight. You came to Japan pursuant to a treaty between the United States and Japan that says you can enter the country, and whatever he said
for 3 months.
Yeah, exactly. I was agreeing with. I was like, yeah, that's right. And he says, okay, processor. And then that was it. So that was that last hurdle.
He's
I
like
had to cross.
The boss came out.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, okay, wow. So then, and that was it for that. And that was from October of 1994 to May of 1995. Okay. And then I had to then apply to, this was the Nishibenran, which is the Japanese Federation of Bar Association.
Okay.
So I had to come back here, and then I applied to them. But it wasn't nowhere as extensive as that Ministry of Justice dealing.
Okay.
So, it was just a couple of, sheets of paper or whatever. So then I had to apply to them to see if they would say yes or no. Mm-hmm. And so it took them a month from May to June. And so they said yes. And then the Okinawa Bar Association. And here in Okinawa, I needed to have the recommendation from 2 Japanese lawyers who said, yeah, they kind of like, we accept her to be one among us, as far as the Bar Association is concerned. So I got Mr. Kawamitsu and Mr. Harushima, and then they signed. And Mr. Kawamitsu was the one who did the bank transaction.
Okay.
Thing. And so he and Mr. Harushima signed letters of recommendation, submitted that in June of 1995, and then July 26, 1995, they called me and say, come pick up my Bengoshi pen.
Okay.
So
finally.
Yes.
Wow.
I was like, oh my God. But if I had seen the big picture early on, I would have said, there's no way I could do that by myself. But you see, it was one hurdle after another. It's like, this thing popped up.
Yeah.
And then I was able to overcome that. And it seemed as though the people that I had met in the past were all aligned to be where they needed to be when I needed them.
Yeah.
And so, 25 years later, here I am.
So it's like almost your purpose then.
Right. Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Wow. And you were determined, because I'm like, some of these things seemed insurmountable.
Right.
But you got over it.
Right.
Still.
Right. And it was all about just, telling my story to different people I meet. And, I could help with that. I could help with that. For example, we used to have a newspaper here, Japan Update newspaper. And Dan Smith, as a matter of fact, worked for Japan Update. And he was working there at that time. So when I got here, and then went through all this, and then finally picked up my pen and everything, and then I could go to immigration and finally get my visa, my legal services visa. Until I got the visa, I could not get a car.
Okay.
Because you to register at City Hall, you need to have some kind of visa to be here, not just as a tourist on our little 90-day visa thing. And so I didn't have a car, so I was renting, a vehicle from the base or whatever. I couldn't buy a car in my name. Japan Update, the owner contacted me and says, hey, we understand you're here. You're coming here to do great things in Okinawa. So what we can do is they would let me use their name to buy a car. Okay. It would be my car. And then as soon as I got all my visa paperwork and all the City Hall paperwork in order, then they would transfer the car in my name. And that's exactly what they did.
Okay. Wow.
So it was, people just reaching out, to help. And that's why, I wondered, I'm like, if I had been in Tokyo versus Okinawa, if the script would have been totally different. Because in mainland Japan, everybody, they have blinders on, they're going where they have to go, and they're not looking around to see who needs help. That's how I view Tokyo. I could be totally wrong.
Okay.
But in Okinawa, everybody's willing to help. It's like, oh, you need help. What's going on? You tell your story. Either if they can't help, they may know somebody who can. So I always felt like I would be taken care of here. Coming to Japan as a single person, on my own or whatever, if I fell on hard times, Okinawa would take care of me.
Wow. Okay, so what has your experience been like? Interfacing with the community in Okinawa, right? As a lawyer, what has that been like over the last quarter century?
It's not anything like what we see going on in the United States. I think here in Okinawa, I have not experienced any discrimination at all.
Okay.
It's what you bring to the table, really, is what's key here. It's not, so much as like, oh, what's the color of your skin, or what's your background, or your nationality, your ethnicity, or whatever. It's all about what you bring to the table. And then that's where the respect and the consideration and, either they're going to help or send you business or whatever. It's all about what you are about.
Okay, so it's what you bring to the table.
Right.
What is it like practicing law in Japan versus the States? Are there any major difference that you've noticed?
Well, for me, I'm spoiled here because I'm the only one.
Okay.
And I say, going back to the States, when I do return to the States, I don't want to practice law. I don't want to work because I've become spoiled.
Okay.
Spoiled meaning that, I call the shots as far as, it's like if a client walk in my door with an attitude or whatever, or, saying things, being rude or nasty to my receptionist, they're gone. I don't care how much money or how valuable the case it is that they have, they're gone. They're out of here. Whereas in the States, there's so many lawyers. You can't afford to put clients out of your office. It's like you're happy when they walk through the door kind of thing. So, that's one of the things where I said I'm pretty much spoiled in practicing law over here as opposed to practicing in the States. But practicing, I do a lot of issues arising on the military base.
Okay.
And that's under military law. So that's a bit different, of course, from, military law based on federal law as opposed to practicing in the United States. Okay. So yes, there is a difference there. But in Japan, the Japanese are kind of like behind as far as the development of the legal system,
okay,
so to speak. And so, what you see here, you're like, we don't do it that way in the States anymore. I mean, that's like long gone.
Have you brought about any change, or updated any laws or any procedure or anything based on like a crossover from the States, like something that's antiquated in Japan, that you're like, okay, look, we do it this way, and then listen to your advice and maybe made some changes? No? Has that happened?
No, because you know how Japan is so entrenched in the way they do things, and they, of course, you can bring about change. Change takes a long time. You can bring about change, and normally change will come in Japan if there's a push from the outside, and the outside means as a foreigner.
Okay.
Because as a Japanese, it's like trying to bring about changes.
It's like they don't want to do it because they want to just remain in line?
I think so. I think they want things to remain as it is.
Okay.
And so to make any changes or be quick to make changes is kind of like, I guess maybe in the back of their mind, they're thinking, so are you trying to impose, the way things are done other places? And it's like, okay, you are coming to change Japan kind of thing. But over time, you can get things done. But like I said, the push has to come from the outside.
Okay. What's your clientele like? Is it mostly Japanese people or foreigners?
I get a pretty good mix because, again, lots of clients from the military base. So I get a pretty good mix of that. But yeah, the majority of the clients, though, are women, Japanese women or Okinawan women.
You moved from the States because you wanted to help them, right?
Right.
Have you felt like you've done like a great job so far? Like you've accomplished most of what you came here to do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? What's your ambition going forward?
Retired, sitting by my swimming pool in my backyard.
In Japan?
in the United States.
Okay, so you plan to go back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, what are you going to miss the most, like, when you eventually do that?
Definitely being able to walk my dog. If I, for whatever reason can't sleep at night and I want to walk my dog at midnight, I can do that. Not a problem at all. In Japan. I can, and walk around the neighborhood and everybody knows you, and, there's always that smile. Taxi drivers, always waving, the recycle truck knows my dog by name.
Okay.
And so those things, it's like you want to go where everybody knows your name, kind of like the television show Cheers. But yeah, I will definitely miss that because, back in the States, I just envision myself, you're in your house, you're locked in your house, innocent people are locked up and it's the guilty ones are running around.
What has your experience been like in mainland Japan versus Okinawa? Wherever you go, how do you feel when you're there?
Now, in mainland Japan, again, if I'm thinking if my first experience with Japan would have been mainland Japan, I probably would not have wanted to move to Japan.
Okay.
Simply because to me, I wouldn't have felt like if I fell on hard times, they would take care of me.
Like no support.
Right, exactly. Because everybody, and I understand, it's like space is a premium. So everybody doing their own thing, whatever, and they want their own space, and they're not looking around to see what's going on, with other people, anybody needing any help
trains,
or whatever.
Definitely you feel that on the
trains. Exactly. And so my experience, if my first experience had been with mainland Japan, I probably would not have felt safe to live in Japan because it's like, who's going to help me kind of thing. Okay. Yeah.
It's not that bad there. Well, I guess because I have a family there, for me, I guess maybe I have that support system.
Right.
But how long were you in Japan prior to coming back to open your office?
I was here from 90 to 93, from May of 1990 to June, July of 1993. Okay. And then I went to California. Okay,
so you've spent almost cumulative almost 30 years.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So 28 thereabout, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I was in California. Then I left California in March of 95 and moved here. And then I've been here ever since.
Any advice for anyone, maybe, I don't know, what are the chances, but if someone is watching, they're like, I want to be a lawyer in Japan. Like, any advice for them? Like, overall, like...
Okay, what they need to understand, first of all, and this is also part of that process of you have to apply to apply.
Okay.
And just know that if you're going to leave the States to practice law in Japan, one of the requirements during the application process is that you have to show that you were engaged in the practice of law in your home country for the past 3 years. When I came along, it was 5 years.
Okay.
So now they have reduced it, so that brought about a change. So now it's the past 3 years. Mm-hmm. You were engaged in an active practice of law in your country. So make sure you do that. When I went through the process, it was around 50,000.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. And that they looked at it and it's like, okay, all right, now you can come, kind of thing. I don't know what it is now. That was 50,000 was 25 years ago. So just know that. And also, if you're going to be, unless you're going to be at one of the, like Baker and McKinsey or, the big law offices in Tokyo, if you say, oh, I'm going there to start my own law practice or whatever, understand that as a foreign lawyer, you cannot take any work away from the Japanese lawyer. So you have to have your own little niche carved out.
Okay.
As to how you're going to make a living. Mm-hmm. Now, if you, like with me, I could take care of a lot of the issues on the military base because I was a former JAG. Mm-hmm. So, with court martials, discrimination cases, stuff like that, medical malpractice cases, then I could make money to stay open, keep my doors open. But I think there have been 2 lawyers who have tried since I've been here. Mm-hmm. And then after a couple of months, they had to close their doors because they didn't have that military experience. And see, that's my fallback. Mm-hmm. And definitely I needed to have something else going on because I was doing pro bono work for these ladies.
For like a decade, you said?
Yes,
wow.
For 10 years. Mm-hmm. So then anybody who's looking at coming over to Japan to say, I want to go practice law, just understand that you have to have some niche carved out where you will not be taking any work away from a Japanese lawyer.
Annette, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I appreciate it.
No problem.
I know it's going to inspire people. I'm inspired. Guys that are watching, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and remember to subscribe to this channel for weekly videos on the Black experience across the globe. Until next time, bye for now.